All right, Sherry, I know you've had lots of experience on many subjects and many symptoms that people might have. One part of mental illness that's not always a mental illness is just grief. Things
Mm.
happen, and there's a loss or some issue that makes us just feel so sad and so grieving. How can you help people who have those symptoms and those feelings going on?
Well, grief is a process, and it's a different process for everyone else. There's stages of grief, and people know those are denial and anger, and bargaining, and all those steps that Dr. Kubler Ross wrote about. But those do not go in any particular order. So when people come in, often one of the first things I do is I ask them, tell me about your loved one. And there's usually, an immediate relaxing with that. And while it brings tears, they're connected to that person, by the sharing of that experience. And, are very eager to tell you who that person was that they loved that meant so much to them.
And so, as folks are talking to you and kind of maybe giving you memories and feelings about that, does that in itself help resolve the grief, or is there more to do?
It helps resolve the grief. The more we're able to process it, the more somebody is willing to listen to us, the more we're able to access our memories. Some of the things that I emphasize with people is that to get better from your grief doesn't mean that you're neglecting or leaving that person behind. Many people, are like, well, if I get better, am I honoring them still? Am I going on and forgetting about them? But, we can still continue to honor and move forward in life, while we have those feelings still for our loved one. And, I always tell people, what are you willing to let go of with the grief? What do you want to hold on to? And I often get people to like write a list of right in that beginning of everything they want to remember about that person that they're afraid they'll forget. We do a great deal of journaling in the practice related to grief. And I have, just sit down and journal all that. Journal every single thing about that person you loved, everything you don't want to forget. It can be as simple as their favorite food and their favorite color, that they were an Alabama fan, and people will go through their list. And, okay, you've got that in writing. You've always got that. You're never going to forget it. So when you heal, you still got your memories. And another thing I do is I'll encourage them to do like a family, like a memorial scrapbook. I did one for my brother, and it's of he and I growing up together. And so on days when I want to be close to him, I pull out my book and I sit in my chair with my cozy blanket on and I look through my book. And I'm connected again. And there's all my beautiful memories, but I'm still living life and going forward.
Makes sense. Let me ask you this, and I might be getting too deep into it, but I know from my own past as a child,
Mm-hmm.
I things happened to me that at the time I didn't call it grief,
Mm-hmm.
and I grew up, and it's still back in there someplace, and so I think I'm affected by grief,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know that for sure. Is that part of grief therapy? If I don't know about some specific event in my past that can be causing me to feel a certain way, is that part of the process?
It can be, and in getting to know a person, you start going back through some history. And often, if you have a new grief, I have found it to be true that a new grief will bring up an old grief. And so your brain again connects with another period of time when you felt this way before. And so, my pet may, pass away today, and while some people that doesn't sound significant, it may also trigger old grief in me when I felt sorrow before. And so you'll access that again and bring it up. And it doesn't mean that a person's not past it, but that, those memories are still strong. And grief feels like grief, even when it's different people in different situations. And it's all intertwined together.
You mentioned something a moment ago that struck me as kind of profound. You talked about how a person who's had a recent episode that's caused them grief in their life has somewhere in the back of their mind or in the front of their mind that if they get over it, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, that they're dishonoring the loved one or the pet or whoever it might be that passed away that triggered the grief. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that so people can understand that it's okay
Mhm.
to grieve, but also to process through it and have that grief go away?
It is, and one of the things that people will tell me in here when we're doing grief therapy is I'm afraid I'll forget, and I'm not supposed to be happy. I'm not supposed to go forward. And I will tell them, it's okay to go forward, and you never have to forget them. And another thing, I'll ask them is, I know from my experience with losing loved ones, they would not want me to stay in sorrow. They would want me to go on, and they would want me to live life.